go into the book of Job. Job chapter 2. Looks like I'm going to be spending about 3 weeks in chapter 2. I've already spent 1 week. This will be the second week, and probably need next week. I hope that's not the pace I'm going to be going at the rest of the book, or it may take half a millennium to get through it. I don't know. But Job chapter 2, let's read down to, I left off at verse 7. Let's read down to verse 6. And it says, "Again, there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan came also among them to present himself before the Lord. The Lord said unto Satan, From whence comest thou? And Satan answered the Lord and said, From going to and fro in the earth, and from walking up and down in it. And the Lord said unto Satan, Hast thou considered my servant Job?" By the way, that's probably how the devil knows kind of what's going on. He doesn't have omniscience, so he's got to stay busy. And he's probably got outposts and listening stations all over the globe. He doesn't have that omniscience that God has, but he's got his pulse on what's going on in this world. Verse 3, it says, "The Lord said unto Satan, Hast thou considered my servant Job, that there is none like him in the earth, a perfect and upright man, one that feareth God and escheweth evil? And still he holdeth fast his integrity, although thou movest me against him to destroy him without cause. And Satan answered the Lord and said, Skin for skin, yea, all that a man hath will he give for his life." A general truth. Usually when it gets down to the flesh, the first thing didn't affect Job in the sense that he said, "The Lord giveth, the Lord taketh away, blessed be the name of the Lord." But it's a whole different ball game when you get touched. And you're the one that's experiencing this pain and suffering that's going on. He's already suffering and grieving over what he's lost, but now it's his own flesh that's being touched. And boy, that'll, I'm real careful. And I need to be more careful. Sometimes you see people suffering, and you think you've got words of encouragement. They're really not. Sometimes there's just no words that you just don't need to say anything. I don't care what it is. In fact, I've got a list here of what not to say. But sometimes people are just suffering. The only thing you can do the best thing you can do is just be silent, but be there. And Satan answered the Lord and said, Skin for skin, yea, all that a man hath will he give for his life. But put forth thine hand now and touch his bone and his flesh. He will curse thee to thy face. Well, he said that once before, it didn't happen. But now he figures around two. He's got Job pegged. He knows this will break him. If Calvin's God were true, doesn't make any sense here about what Satan's saying, is it? Does it? Why test a man you know that God's not going to pull the string and let him deny him or curse him, right? Why go through it? Why even state that if you touch his bone and his flesh, he'll curse thee to thy face? If everything's already, predestinated and God's sovereign and you can't do anything without God making you do it, then why even have the test? And the Lord said unto Satan, Behold, he is in thine hand. The Lord said unto Satan, Behold, he is in thine hand, but save his life. So the Lord allows this thing, and it's going to, here it comes. But notice that the Lord always has control of the test. Always has control of the trial. And how warm it gets, how long it lasts, that's all in God's hands. And a lot of times, when you're going through it, the short ones you kind of get through and you say, whew. Boy, them long ones that hang on, they can be a test of your faith. And by the way, preacher probably going through that today. Anyway, I'll talk about that in between services. It says, verse 7, So went Satan forth from the presence of the Lord, and smote Job with sore boils from the sole of his foot unto his crown. Now, you ever had a boil? I think I've had maybe one, small one, nothing huge. But I've seen boils that were, they were vicious. They'd look like a small mountain on your back or something, and so painful to the touch. Have you ever had a pimple inside your ear or inside your nose, and you just touch it? Just multiply that 100 times, but boils can be extremely painful. We don't know what the disease is. We're not told what the disease is. Of course, everybody's got an idea. Smallpox. They got down leprosy, and I'm going to tell you why I don't think it was leprosy. Titus, it doesn't have another T in there. Elephantiasis, I think it is. They've been suggested. It could have been a combination of several. Who's to say it's just one disease? I mean, man, if he was going to work him over, man, he might have smote him with several diseases. All we know is that from the bottom of his foot to his crown, he's got these boils. Boils are painful. One is painful. I can't imagine your whole body. The reason I don't think it's leprosy, I don't think his three friends would have showed up. I think they'd have steered clear of him if it had been leprosy. And leprosy is for those who take the mark in the trib, not Israel, who's persecuted by the devil. So it kind of doesn't fit the narrative of what this is about. So, and leprosy is not boils. It's sores, but it's, I'm sorry? Yeah, it's flesh eating. It's not so much boils. So I have no idea what it was. Anybody got a guess? Boils. I mean, that says it all. Given it a medical term, who cares? Boils. I got a body full of boils. Look at, Revelation 16:2 says, "And the first went and poured out his vial upon the earth, and there fell a noisome and grievous sore upon the men which had the mark of the beast, and upon them which worshipped his image." So there's the reference where in the tribulation, leprosy is coming back. There's 2 chapters in your Bible devoted to it. Is it Numbers 13 and 14, I think it is? Huh? Yep, 13 and 14. When the Bible spends 2 chapters on something, how to identify it, there's a reason for that. And that's the thing, they call it Hansen's disease now, but that's the thing that's going to come back during the trib. They have treatments for it, but I don't know if they really have a cure for it. Maybe they got some, maybe certain types of it. There's always certain types of everything. Even bubonic plague has 3 or 4 types to it. I'm sorry? Leviticus. Oh, Leviticus? Okay, thank you for that correction. So they get this sore in the tribulation, and it looked like it's on them that take the mark. So I don't think he got that. Now somebody does get sick. Look at Matthew 25, verse 36. You got to remember that even though the Lord is reestablishing his relationship with Israel during the tribulation, a good portion of that thing goes by, and the Bible talks about them being under the rod. This is a judgment for them. This is judgment on Israel. You say, well, haven't they had enough? Evidently not. This is what turns them. And man, the judgments that he promised on them for turning their back on him. I mean, we'll look at that in a minute. He says in Matthew 25:36, it said, "Naked and ye clothed me, I was sick." See that? "And ye visited me. I was in prison and ye came unto me." But no, he says, "I was sick and ye visited me." Well, you've got Job as a type of Israel. He's sick, and who comes to visit? But friends that care about him. Okay. Now, we'll find out that, sometimes friends are no help at all. But Israel's promised sicknesses and diseases from God for their disobedience. Look at Deuteronomy chapter 28. Deuteronomy chapter 28. Look at verse 58. He says, "If thou wilt not observe to do all the words of this law that are written in this book, that thou mayest fear this glorious and fearful name, the Lord thy God, then the Lord will make thy plagues wonderful." Now, it's not So these are good plagues. They make you feel good. No. Wonderful means you're full of wonder, like what's happened to you, what in the world is going on. Shall make thy plagues wonderful, and the plagues of thy seed, even affecting the children, even great plagues, of long countenance, and sore sicknesses, and of long countenance. That's pretty rough, man. He says, moreover, he will bring upon thee all the diseases of Egypt, with which thou wast afraid of, and they shall cleave unto thee. Also every sickness and every plague which is not written in the book of this law, them will the Lord bring upon thee, until thou be destroyed, and ye shall be left few in number, whereas ye were as the stars of heaven for multitude, because thou wouldest not obey the voice of the Lord thy God. Well, you read that, man, you realize that, the Lord's not kidding. And the church has portrayed the God of the Bible in a whole different light than what Scripture portrays him. And I'm not saying that he's less than what he's being portrayed. It's just more complete and balanced of when you take the Bible as it is of how he's portrayed. And when I read that instills fear in me. How about you? That instills fear in me. And you know what? It's good to fear the Lord. Keep you out of trouble. And man, he told Israel, now he told them up front, he goes, listen, if you're going to follow me, you're going to do what I tell you, you're going to obey my laws, and if you turn your back on me and worship idols, here's what I'm going to do to you, what I did those nations I kicked out and gave you their land. And he did, and he has been. So, verse 8, and he took him a potsherd to scrape himself withal, and sat down among the ashes. It's a piece, or a potsherd is a piece or a fragment of a broken pot. We say a shard of glass. This is a shard of pottery. Some pot that he's probably found it. It's likely that he's at the city dump, and he's found himself a piece of pottery, and he needs that, to scrape. They come to a head. You got to scrape the pus away. You got to scrape the dead skin away, and he's probably got bugs that are bothering him. That's probably why he's sitting in the ashes. Ashes are very alkaline, and so that's something he could sit in. Plus, it's probably comfortable if he's got a nice ash heap he's sitting in. It's probably about the only thing he can sit. There's just certain things that, a creature comfort of an ash heap, but yet, I don't know, it probably provides... probably keeps the bugs off of him to a certain degree, but he's having to scrape himself from these wounds. And there's probably, with anything, that where one begins to heal and the other, incessant itching. That can drive you crazy, just that. So he may be using that potsherd to scratch the itches that are all over him, That's probably not even a word. But the reason I think he's moved to the city dump is this is where carcasses are burned. This is where they would burn carcasses. They would take them out and burn them there. You would have ash heaps there. It symbolizes something dead and decomposing. And look at Jeremiah 6:26. Jeremiah 6:26. Now, I can't prove it. He says, O daughter of my people, it says, gird thee with sackcloth and wallow thyself in ashes. Make thee mourning as for an only son, most bitter lamentation, for the spoiler shall suddenly come upon thee. The old adage, ashes to ashes and dust to dust. By sitting in that ash heap, Job's declaring himself already dead. He just hasn't, he's dead, he just hasn't given up the shout yet. He hasn't just laid down a bit, but as far as he's concerned, he's a dead man. And that's another reason he may be laying among those ashes. I think it provides some, I figured out one time I was teaching numbers, and they talked about using ashes and water, and they would go, the ashes of that heifer, and they would go in and take the ashes and water, and they would sprinkle stuff with it. And I'm thinking, usually there's a reason why God has them do just about anything, and they would just sprinkle the things of the temple. And come to find out that, how you make lye is with animal fat and ashes, because the alkalinity is so strong. So even water and ashes creates a strong alkali. And they were probably using that to sanitize and kill things. Sodium hydroxide is chemical lye. And I've worked with that stuff. I worked with it for years in the laboratory. Let me tell you something, man. We handled it with as much care as we handled sulfuric acid. And I handled a lot of sulfuric acid because it would burn you just as quick, eat you up just as quick. And it was just pure lye. And it's just the opposite of the scale. Instead of being acidic, it was just strong alkali. Well, those ashes, they'll provide a strong alkali. And that's one of the reasons I think he might have sat in that ash heap. Maybe it helped in some way. I don't know. Also, Exodus 9:10, and I just saw that or remembered this, and I went to it. I can't tie it in. I don't know how it fits, but I just thought it was interesting that when Moses plagued Egypt with boils, he took the ashes of the furnace. Now, I don't know. That's where my brain stops. But I thought, boils and ashes, and there they are. He says, and they took ashes of the furnace and stood before Pharaoh, and Moses sprinkled it up toward heaven, and it became a boil breaking forth with blains upon man and upon beast. I don't know. Maybe it pictures a judgment that Moses is going to put upon this earth, where he smites the earth with boils. I don't know. I don't know how that. Usually it's everybody but the Israelites that got the plagues. They were safe in the land of Goshen. And they didn't get the plagues, not like the Egyptians did. So again, I really don't know how to apply that. I just thought it was interesting that in Exodus 9:10 that he used ashes and brought forth boils. Now we have a man that's got boils sitting in ashes. I don't know. Look at verse 9. Then said his wife unto him, dost thou still retain thine integrity? Curse God and die. What a thing to say. Notice she's already there. Dost thou still? She's already there. She's already been there. She's already cursed God. And, well, we'll talk about that in a second. First, it's not a wife's place to make that call. It's just not. There's a reason for that. More times than not, they're wrong when they try to make a spiritual call for the family. Spiritual discernment is not a woman's strong suit. That's where she is called the weaker vessel. Okay? And there's some other things. It's the way a man is and the way that a woman is, the differences in them that also have influence on that. But she is the weaker vessel when it comes to spiritual things. I've seen women do anything a man can do, just about. Strength-wise, there's always some women that have that kind of strength, but the strongest woman in the world can't match the strongest man in the world. I mean, I'm talking about even today. They don't even come close to the muscle mass. But women can run things. They can be politicians. There's been some. Margaret Thatcher was a great politician. Now for every good one, there's 1,000 bad ones. But that's true with the men too. So can't say anything there, can we? But they can do just about anything that a man can do when it comes to the things of this world. But when it comes to spiritual things, they're at a disadvantage. You'll notice that when Satan wants to attack, listen, he's not trying to get to Eve. He's trying to get to Adam. He cannot go directly to Adam. Adam's going to see through it. Adam's going to know he's being played. So he goes to the woman because he knows one thing. If there's anything that can trip up a man, it's a woman. So he goes to his woman to get to him. And it worked. He went to the weaker vessel. He knew he could fool her, but he couldn't fool him. But he knew he could get her to get him to do what he wanted. And he did. And that's why it says, 1 Peter 3:7, likewise ye husbands, dwell with them according to knowledge, giving honor to the wife, And then that's so. Listen, the most honored women in the world are Christian women. If you don't believe that, take a trip. They're honored and respected more than probably any women on earth. But that's not enough here, you know. They're not trying to be equal. They're trying to be superior. And you'll never be equal. There's, you say all men are created equal. Well, some man said that. The Bible didn't say that. I've never met two men that were equal in my life, and neither of you. I've never met two women that were equal. They didn't have equal looks, equal posture, anything about it, equal finances, nothing. There's no such thing as being completely equal. We're all different. We might be equally sinful, or we're equally under the wrath of God when it comes to that thing. He says, giving honor to the wife as unto the weaker vessel, and being heirs together the grace of life, and your prayers be not hindered. But there's the understanding that a man dwells with a woman with an understanding that she is the weaker vessel, that she might be prompted to do something or have you do something that God doesn't want you to do. Case in point, Adam and Eve. When the woman saw that the tree was good for food, that it was pleasant to the eyes, and a tree to be desired to make one wise, she took of the fruit thereof and did eat, and gave unto her husband with her, and he did eat. And we've been having graveyards and hospitals and wars and disease and crime and famine and you name it. Every evil that you can name we've had because of that day and that decision. Mrs. Abraham made the call. In Genesis 16:2, and Sarah said unto Abram, behold now, the Lord hath restrained me from bearing. I pray thee, go in unto my maid. It may be that I may obtain children by her. And Abraham hearkened to the voice of Sarai. And there's where your Arabs came from. That had been a pain in Israel's side for how many centuries? How many millennia? You say, listen to it. Well, somebody else, Mrs. Thomas. She nearly made that call. She said to get out of this church while the getting was good. Now, I don't blame her for that. That's just a woman. But she saw the way things were going and saw how it was going to go. She says, let's get out of here. Even the kids were saying, let's vamoose, let's get out of here. I said, God didn't tell me to get out of here. God didn't tell me to go. I said, well, go when God tells me. Here I am. Why? Because God didn't tell me to go. If I'd have listened to her, I wouldn't be pastoring the church today. And it's not that I blame her for anything. No, I understand her. Dwell with them according to knowledge. But I also understand this. God's going to tell me, not her. He's going to tell me we should leave. He's going to tell me where I should go. He's not going to tell her. If he starts telling her, then I've quit doing my job of being the spiritual head of the house. That's just the way it is. Job's wife, you say, what's wrong with Job's wife? Her gods are dead. They're called 10 children. Now, I'm not saying that callously. I'm just saying that with a woman, it is a religion of love. I'm telling you. It's a religion of love. All any woman ever wants is unconditional love. And who in this world provides that probably more than anyone else are your children. There's hardly a kid on the planet that doesn't love mom. Even mom's terrible mom, they love mom. That she gravitates toward that kind of love. And it's her desire in her life. So it's overwhelming to her when it's taken from her. It's overwhelming. Understand that. The thing is, where the error is without the blessing of your Creator, you don't have anything. You don't have anything anyway, right? We get the thing, she's at the point where curse God and died. Here's what she doesn't realize. She just goes off. We don't know what happens to her. It doesn't say Job gets her back, okay? But if she'd have stuck around, if she'd have listened, if she'd have followed her husband in that decision. And I know how hard that could be, ladies. You say, well, I'm married to a half-wit. I understand that. My wife's married to a half-wit, and she has to live by my decisions. But somehow God blesses that and takes care of that anyway. You know, God can still bless you even though your husband, you know, he might not be all up there. I don't know. But God can still bless you for being obedient. I forgot the point I was going to make. Okay. Oh, if she'd have stuck around, what would she have got back? Her kids. You know, I wanted to say that thing about Adam and Eve. The reason he wanted to get to Adam is Adam's got the seed, man. Seed's with the man. He can't cause the fall of the human race by getting to Eve. That wouldn't do it. But he's not trying to get to Eve. He is trying to get to Eve, or get to Adam through Eve. Because once the man sins, that was it, man. If he wouldn't have sinned, I don't know what God would have done, but the human race wouldn't have been in peril because he's got the seed. Maybe she's afraid at that point, well, if I better get him to go along with this program, or it looks like I'm going to be the divorced. He's got grounds for divorce. I don't know. Okay. The mentality of Christians is that there's a natural mentality that if you're not successful and healthy, you could not possibly be in the will of God. I mean, think about Job's situation. He's got these boils covering his whole body. The Lord has just took everything away from him. 10 of his children are dead. Everything he owned is gone. He's sitting in an ash heap, covered in boils, and his wife just looks at him, just curse God and die, get it over with. She just assumes, like a lot of Christians would, that, boy, you know, he's probably not saved. That's what I think. What do you think? I think he's not saved. Or if he is saved, man, I knew there was something wrong with that guy. I wonder what it was. It had to be bad. Look what's come on him. You know, people think the worst of you. Yet in the Scriptures, we find situations where people, they weren't necessarily, you know, had everything in this world, but yet, according to the Lord Jesus Christ, they were quite the saint. The widow and her 2 mites, I mean, she was in the will of God, and she was poor. I mean, wasn't she? The blind man, when they asked that who sinned, in John 9, verse 2 and 3, and his disciples asked, saying, Master, who did sin, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? Jesus answered, neither hath this man sinned nor his parents, but that the works of God should be made manifest in him. It was the will of God that he was blind. So, just because there's infirmity on you doesn't mean that it's because of sin. It may be that God just wants to be glorified through your life. You know, think about the Apostle Paul and his physical infirmities. He got those added so that he would stay in the will of God, not because the temptation was for him to become proud. Because of the revelations that he got, the light that he had, he was just going to be full of pride. So the Lord took him down a notch or two and kept him there. But you know, Paul realized that his power, the power that he had, was because of those infirmities. He said, therefore I'll glory in those. He says, if this will keep me filled with the Spirit of God and full of power and winning people to God and raising up Timothy's and Titus's, that's what I want. And he had it. Dr. Ruckman said this about Job's trial. He says, Job's trial is a sore trial, and perhaps the fiercest things that a man in pain ever had to endure were the added taunts of those who take his misfortune to be a token of his damnation. Taunts. People taunting you. And that ends up what happened. You know, when we go into these 3 gentlemen, I'm going to give them the benefit of a doubt. I am, because they showed up. I'm just going to think that the thing went sideways. The more they listened to Job, the worse they got. And I think that's just this human nature. You know, it's easy to judge something when you're not in pain. Easy. But if you were in pain, you might be thinking differently. I don't expect people that are in pain to have a smile on their face. Some do anyway. But I don't expect them to. I probably wouldn't. Philippians 1:28 says, and in nothing terrified by your adversaries, which is to them an evident token of perdition, but to you of salvation, that of God. Notice it says, to them an evident token of perdition. That even the lost out there, man, when something's happening to you, they say, yeah, I knew he was a faker. God's squishing him like a bug. Especially when you have spiritual enemies. And there are plenty out there that could have spiritual enemies, or you could have spiritual enemies, and they'll wish your demise. But I tell you what, there are probably just as many people rejoiced when Dr. Ruckman died as those that rejoiced that he was alive. Because he had enemies. He had a lot of them that didn't like him. Mainly because he called them out on something. When it came to that Bible, thing was, he outlived a lot of them. He really did. In Dr. Ruckman's personal testimony, he doesn't expect to live past 40. Or, he doesn't think he's going to live long at all because he lived such a dangerous lifestyle before he got saved. And he said he looked younger at 40 than he did when he got saved. Now, I don't know if that's true. I think some age like that. But he said he looked younger then than the photograph of him of when he got saved because of the way he was living. He didn't expect to live a long life. He lived to be 94. That's pretty good, man. Considering 70 is the average, when you're right and know you're right and suffering for it, okay, and then somebody comes along and starts slamming you, it's not easy to take. I got down three passages here. Matthew 27, verse 39 to 42. It says, and they that passed by reviled him. You know who they passed by, right? Jesus Christ on the cross. They passed by, they reviled him, wagging their heads. I would say, what's wagging their heads? Just wagging their heads and saying, thou that destroyest the temple and buildest it in 3 days, save thyself. Well, in 3 days he did resurrect that temple right there. If thou be the Son of God, come down from the cross. Now, I think there's some spiritual things going on there. Why somebody wants him to come down. But notice they're taunting him. I don't think we'd take it so gladly. I'll bet them other two thieves were cussing people left and right, man. I'll bet they were swearing. We don't get a clear picture of everything that's going on in here. And because something changes that thief, both of them were casting, it says they cast it in their teeth or something like that. They were railing on him. Both of them were. But all of a sudden, one of them changes his mind completely. I mean, Jesus Christ is a testimony on the cross, man. And he sees something in this guy. He says, man, he probably heard of him and thought, it's true. It's true. There's nobody could take this like this guy's taking this. If thou be the Son of God, come down from the cross. Likewise also the chief priest, mocking him with the scribes and elders, said, he saved others, himself he cannot save. If he be the King of Israel, let him now come down from the cross, and we will believe him. It's a good thing he didn't, amen. In 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 19 to 21, for this is thankworthy, if a man for conscience toward God endure grief, suffering wrongfully. So you can expect a little bit of what Job got. There's always somebody that's going to be glad you're hurting. I mean, if everybody thought well of you, that which is highly esteemed among men is an abomination in the sight of God. That's not good. What's the other verse? Woe be unto you when all men speak well of you. I think that was a paraphrase version, but when everybody speaks well of you, when somebody doesn't have any, somebody doesn't criticize you, there's something wrong. For what glory is it if you be buffeted for your faults, ye shall take it patiently. But if when ye do well and suffer for it, ye take it patiently, this is acceptable with God. So, he's not talking about suffering for wrongdoing. He's talking about suffering for doing the right thing. For even hereunto were ye called, because Christ also suffered for us, leaving us an example that we should follow his steps. in Job chapter 8, verse 4 to 6, I believe this is what one of them is saying to Job. If thy children have sinned against him, and he have cast them away for their transgression, what a thing to say, man. Hey, God killed your 10 kids because, they did something wrong. What a thing to say. If thou wouldest seek unto God betimes, that means early, and make thy supplication to the Almighty, if thou wert pure and upright, surely now he would wait for thee. I mean, they're just saying to Job, this has happened to you because of wickedness, friend. I mean, this is the only reason God ever does this to somebody is because they're wicked as hell. But it's not necessarily true, now is it? It says, surely now he would awake for thee and make the habitation of thy righteousness prosperous. All right, I'm going to stop there. We're going to get some good parts. It'll take me at least next week to cover everything else. Okay, any questions about what we covered?